Friday to end the Kootenay school strike. West Kootenay school strike lockout, involving the CUPE locals and involving the school districts and Selkirk College. We know it's going to happen. What we don't know is what the legislation is going to be, whether it's going to be a special bill of the legislature, which is more likely, or some other form of legislative action. Now, the timetable, and this is of great interest to people throughout the province of British Columbia, now is that Premier Bennett is presently consulting with, double-checking the plans, and I presume, we don't know yet, the draft legislation with Labour Minister Allan Williams. And as soon as he is ready, the Premier will go to the media centre in the Parliament buildings in Victoria, which I can see is presently empty and darkened. And after that, Premier Bennett has agreed to come live on this programme to tell you precisely what he is going to do. We will cover the announcement by the Premier live, and then we'll be able to interview the Premier on it a few minutes later. There is a prospect too, a possibility, that we might also get NDP leader Dave Barrett, who's presently organising his troops for the session tomorrow, in on the programme before 10:30. We've got the live microwave feed between here and Victoria from now until we go off the air at 10:30. It's even more important than you might think when you realise that there are a number of key factors involved. Obviously, the school board in the Kootenays will accept back to work without a shadow of a doubt. CUPE, we don't quite know. Hopefully they will. The BC Federation of Labour has announced its opposition and talks already about the wrath of the labour movement on a back-to-work order. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fill you in on the background of the dispute, and we're standing by with our John Gibbs and our camera crew in Victoria to bring you this key development, remembering that this is only the second time that I can recall, hope I'm right, on back-to-work legislation by the Legislature. Dave Barrett, of course, brought in his tough back-to-work legislation in the IWA strike and the pulp workers strike, with the IWA locked out by the picket lines towards the end of his 3-year term. And many people think that the back-to-work move by him caused him a lot of trouble in the following election. Political implications for Premier Bennett, of course, are different, because his is not an NDP party. His is a social credit party. But now we're standing by in Victoria. We shall give you the news break as soon as it comes, and I shall deal with matters on the West Kootenay school strike, which will set the pattern perhaps for all of non-teaching people in the schools in a couple of minutes. The education, or the resumption of education for 14,000 school children in the West Kootenays is at stake this morning, with Premier Bennett's announced action that he's going to call the Legislature back into session tomorrow to deal with this very stubborn and tough strike, the CUPE locals and the school boards. What brought about the resurgence of interest in it? I'll tell you what brought it about, although he's taken some heat on it. That was what McGeer said on this program on November the 27th, a week ago Monday. Here he is.
I can't stop it as Minister, but I can assure you that if I did have the power to stop it, I would. Well, because I disagree strongly with what's taking place.
Have you looked at the definition of essential services? Do you
Yes.
think that that possibly could come under, after a period of time, the essential services, or would you have to bring the Legislature into session and order them back to work with an act?
No, it would be declared, and I think that every time you use the Essential Services Act, you do so with a good deal of trepidation and concern, because it's a pretty heavy club.
I'm getting all kinds of mail from the West Kootenays, desperate parents, and you've seen our television coverage of it. Are you going to advocate that if this West Kootenay strike lockout continues, that the Cabinet impose essential services back to work?
Yeah, I think...
Would you say yes?
I think, certainly. I think beyond a certain point. Naturally, we've been patient. And what's gone on in the West Kootenays is agonizing for the parents there.
Dreadful.
It's dreadful. It isn't the first time in British Columbia that something like this has taken place. It seems to me that so far, in the instances where we've had this kind of dispute in the community, it's been in a heavily unionized area where opinions are very sharply divided. And as you know, some teachers feel so strongly they won't cross picket lines in situations like this. And so you get this, this feeling in heavily unionized areas that's different.
And also the weather, too. You can't work in schools in the West Kootenays this time of the year without heat, can you?
That's right. That's
well,
right.
now, I just wanted to ask you that once again, just so if the news hour wants a clip.
Yeah.
Asked today by Webster was the following question to Dr. McGeer. When will you move to get the Cabinet to apply essential services on the West Kootenay CUPE strike and the school board lockouts in that district?
Well, Jack, it's a Cabinet decision, and the pros and the cons of making that move have to be weighed. Every time you seek a solution to one problem, you may create others. And I can't give you any indication as to what the Cabinet might decide. But from the perspective of the Minister of Education, what's taking place is a dreadful, even a disgraceful thing for the children of British Columbia. Now, those who aren't affected can afford to be indifferent to it. But for those parents whose youngsters are having their education impaired by this, it's a serious matter, and I completely sympathize with them. I think what's taking place, Jack, is disgraceful.
Have you yet recommended to the Cabinet that they consider essential services?
No, but I'm going to be doing that if it carries on much longer.
Soon?
Because, yes.
Within the next 2 weeks?
Yes.
Pat McGeer will recommend to the Cabinet within 2 weeks, if the solution, if the dispute is not settled, that the Cabinet consider imposing an essential services ban to work.
Correct.
That was a piece of history. I did that this morning for 2 reasons. One, I'm filling and backing and backing and filling until we get the announcement from the Premier at 9:30. But 2, to give McGeer a little bit of credit under pressure. At least he brought the dispute, and I helped him, I must confess, to bring the dispute back to life. And the reaction from the West Kootenays has been in some ways, and I'm not talking about CUPE or the school boards, bitter. No doubt about it. You can feel it in the telephone calls from up there. If this was down on the lower mainland, it would have been settled long ago. So somebody deserves credit for taking action. He talked about 2 weeks. It's been exactly 10, 11 days tomorrow when the legislature meets. There isn't any doubt, of course, that the Social Credit can pass any legislation it wants in that legislature. Perhaps we'll hear from Dave Barrett later on as to what kind of, how long the fight will be, how long the session will be. It's unlikely, in my view, that over an issue like this, where one government is pinning its flag to a mast on back-to-work legislation, that there will be a filibuster of any kind from the NDP. I mean, the legislation is going to come in, presumably it has been drafted, presumably it contains specific provision for instant return after the school holidays, and we don't know yet if it's going to include a legislated settlement on a temporary basis, which is sometimes what happens in the federal strikes, with, say, an industrial inquiry commissioner handing down binding arbitration. Some formula of that sort. That's not really all that important just for the moment until we get the full details of the legislation itself. Obviously, the parents in the Kootenays, whom Brian Coxford and I interviewed at length last week, and by the way, Coxford's on his way again up there, and we're going to give you the coverage tomorrow from the West Kootenays on the reaction from CUPE and everybody else once we know the details of the legislation. But the key thing right now, once the legislation is known, and I'm going to reach back into the 6 o'clock news last night, is what kind of attitude will organised Labour take. Now let's look at the clip from the news hour last night of James Kinnaird, the new boss of the BC Federation of Labour.
The Labour movement's not going to stand by for intervention in the free collective bargaining system. That has been determined by convention, and so if need be, the wrath of the Labour movement will be raised at that particular point.
Now, that obviously was a clip. It wasn't a full explanation of what Kinnaird's total views are. But as he says quite clearly, if need be, the wrath of the Labour movement in BC will be organised at that particular point. This is where the public gets kind of confused. They don't know if it's the wrath of the Labour movement. You know, every single union worker in British Columbia getting up in the morning and say, I am full of wrath at the back-to-work order. Or if it's the rightful wrath or unrightful that's not the right word, wrath of the labor movement had free collective bargaining been taken away. There are many, many precedents, however, in our society, going back just to Cup W on the postal union, where wrath or no wrath, in the final analysis, and that's what you got to look at, as Coxford says, on the bottom line. You finally look at the bottom line and you say, does the interest of the public warrant more and specific consideration and protection than two stubborn parties knocking each other's heads together while the education system in the West Kootenays goes down the drain? That's the issue that's going to be involved. We do know this much, though. The room's still empty in Victoria. We do know this much, though. The legislature is being called tomorrow. The legislature will deal with some legislated end to the West Kootenay school strike. Might be a good idea right now, while we're waiting for the Premier to make his statement in Victoria. If you want to give me your views one way or the other on whether you want a back-to-work order. Would you like to do that? While we're waiting and John Gibbs is waiting for the Premier to appear in Victoria. I'll tell you what I'd like to do right now. Might be a significant indication of something or other. I don't want views on the school strike. I want to know, in one of my celebrated quickly taken polls, whether you are for a back-to-work order, which is going to come, or against a back-to-work order. So please tell me, yes, you're for it, or no, you're against it. And we'll take a fair number of calls. We'll carry it on all morning. Take a fair number of calls to see how you come out. So those listening on the telephones right now and those phoning, all I want is yes, I'm for it, or no, I'm against it, or yes, I'm for it. Are you for or against the back-to-work order?
Yes, definitely. Legislate them back to work right away.
Thank you. How about you?
No way.
You're against it. Thank you. How about you?
Definitely.
For it?
Definitely.
Thank you. Are you for it?
For it, forever.
Thank you. Are you for it?
No way.
Against it? Are you for it?
I'm for it.
Thank you. Are you for it?
For it.
That's 5-2. Are you for it?
Against it, very definitely. Also against your kids.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm giving you a fair crack. Are you for it or against it? Where are you speaking from?
Victoria?
All right. Are you for or against it?
Against it.
Against it. Thank you, ma'am. Where are you speaking from?
Prince George?
Are you for or against the back-to-work order?
Yes, I am. Can I ask you a question?
Are you for or against it?
Yes.
Yes, for or no against?
Yes, I'm for them going back.
Thank you, ma'am. You're for them going back. Thank you very much indeed. So I made a mess of my calls there. It's 6-4 at the moment. 6 for a back-to-work order, 4 against it. Are you for or against it?
Definitely for.
Thank you very much. How about you?
For it.
Thank you. How about you? Come on.
For it.
Thank you. How about you?
100% for.
Thank you. How about you?
I'm for it.
Thank you. That's 5 more. That's 11-4. How about you?
Against.
Against it. Thank you. How about you?
For it.
For it. Just a minute. I fouled this up a little bit. I said 11-4, 11-5, 12-5. Good. How about you? Hello.
Hello?
Are you for it or against it?
For it.
For it. 13-5. How about you? Are you there?
Definitely for it.
Thank you. 14. Are you for or against it?
I'm for back to work and for right to work.
15-5. How about you?
For it.
16-5. How about you?
I'm against it.
16-6. How about you?
Against it.
16-7. How about you? Come on.
For it.
17-7. New page. 17-7. I've done you. How about you? You're not there. How about you?
Against.
17-8. How about you?
For it.
18-8. How about you?
For it.
19-8. How about you?
Against.
19-9. How about you?
I'm for it.
20-9. How about you?
1,000% for, Jack.
21-9. How about you?
For it.
22-9. How about you? You. Come on.
For it.
23. How about you? Where are you?
Against.
23-10. It's going quite significantly, I suppose. Where are you speaking from? Nobody there. How about you?
Oh, I'm definitely for it.
24. How about you?
Against.
11. How about you?
Definitely against.
12. How about you? How about you?
For it.
25 to 12. How about you?
Definitely against.
25 to 13. How about you?
Oh, against.
25 to 14. Where are you speaking from?
Phoning from Selmo, and I'm against it.
Okay, 25 to 15. How about you?
1,000 times no.
25 to 16, and you page new numbers. I never was meant to cut out to be a bean counter. 25 to 16. Go ahead, please.
Yes, for it.
26. How about you? Come on.
For it.
27. You? Hello?
Against.
27 to 17. How about you?
Against.
27 to 18. How about you? How about you?
I'm against it.
19. You? You?
Against it.
Okay, that's 27 to 20. I better take a break, line up the tall calls, and by the time we finish another segment, I think we'll be ready for Victoria, hopefully. 2 minutes, your calls, for or against. Back to work order. I'm backing and filling at the moment until the Premier comes into the conference room in Victoria to make his specific statement at a general press conference on the action for tomorrow's legislature. We know the legislature is going to meet tomorrow to handle the West Kootenay school strike lockout, CUPE versus the school boards. That much we know. And after he's done his press conference, we'll have a few minutes with him ourselves direct from Victoria. I've been doing a poll. So far it's 27 people who are in favour of back to work order and 20 who are against it. How about Castlegar? How do you feel?
Against.
That's 21. How about Ashcroft? How do you feel?
Against, definitely.
22. How about you?
For it.
28, 22. How about you?
Against it.
28, 23. How about you?
For it.
29, 23. How about you?
I'm for it.
30. How about you?
Against.
24. How about you?
For it.
31. How about you?
For it, definitely.
32. How about you? Hello there.
Oh, against it, Mr. Webster.
Thank you very much, ma'am. These polls, I don't pretend they have any scientific base, but it shows an element of feeling. You can say that much anyway. And it's 32 to 25 at the moment. Where are you speaking from? Hello?
London.
Where from?
London.
Are you for or against it?
Against it.
26. Thank you, ma'am. How about you?
Against.
27. How about you?
For it.
33. How about you?
Against it.
28. How about you?
For it.
34. How about you?
Definitely against enough dictatorship.
29. How about you?
Against it.
30. How about you?
For it.
35. How about you? Nobody there. New sheet of paper. 35 for it, 30 against it. Where are you speaking from?
Winfield.
Where do you stand on it?
2 in our house against.
Only count 1. That's cheating. How about you?
Against.
Are you, ma'am?
Yes, against.
Against. Okay, 32. How about you?
I'm against it.
33. You?
Against.
34. You? Nobody there. How about you?
Against.
35. Now tied at 35-35. Interesting. Go ahead. Proves one thing anyway. We've got viewers who are prepared to dial on a poll. Go ahead, please.
For it.
36. And you?
Put him back to work.
37. And you?
Against.
36. And you? Hung up on me. Where are you speaking from?
The cusp.
Nacusp. How do you stand on the back to work order, which is going to be announced in some detail, hopefully, by Premier Bennett in a few minutes in Victoria?
For it.
For it. Did you say for it?
For it, yes.
38 to 36. Where are you speaking from?
Mission.
Mission. What do you say?
Definitely against.
37. Running almost neck and neck. How about you?
Whoops.
Are there 2 different calls on that line?
Sounds like it.
The woman first. How do you stand for it? How are you on it?
I can hardly hear you there.
Are you for or against it?
Huh?
Never mind, ma'am. Hang up your phone and try again. Where are you speaking from?
Nanaimo, I'm against it.
You're against it. That makes it 38-38. Thank you very much, sir. We'll go down the line from the top this time. Are you for or against it?
For it.
39. How about you?
4.
40. How about you?
Against it.
39. How about you?
Against.
40. 40 again. How about you?
For it.
41. How about you? How about you?
For it.
42. How about you?
For it.
43. Where are you speaking from? Where are you from?
Duncan?
How do you stand on it?
For it.
For it. 44. How about you? Where are you speaking from?
Victoria.
How much? How do you stand?
I'm for back to work.
45 to 40. Down the line again. Somebody there?
Hello?
Are you for or against a back-to-work order?
Yes, 1,000%.
With it? Against it? Against it, he said, didn't he? 41. How about you?
For it.
46. And you?
For it.
47. And you?
Against.
42. And you?
Against.
43. And you?
For it.
48. And you?
Definitely for it.
49. And you?
Against it.
49, 44. Thanks very much for your call, sir. Kind of you to cooperate. Where are you speaking from?
Merit.
Where do you stand on it?
I'm for it.
50, 44. How about you?
I'm for it.
51. Where are you speaking from?
I'm speaking from Salt here on the island.
Thank you. And how about you? Where are you? Oh, no, nobody there. Sorry, wrong phone. Are you for or against it?
For.
52.
Okay.
And you?
For it.
3. And you?
Against it.
45. And you?
Against it.
46. And you?
For it.
Oh, 54, 46. Now, I see some action in the room in Victoria. Any idea when they're going to start the press conference yet? Anybody of this? Of any of this vast staff? We're not ready yet, are we? Thousands of people scurrying about here. Are you for or against it? Hello there.
Yeah, no bloody way against it.
Oh, thank you for your colourful language, sir. Such words as those have never crossed my lips. Go ahead, please.
Against it.
Against it, 48. How about yours?
For it.
55, 48. And you?
For it. Fast.
56, 48. And how about you?
For it.
57. And you? Nobody there. How about you?
I'm for it.
58, 48. How about you?
Against.
58, 49. New page, 58, 49. Where are you speaking from?
Kamloops.
Where do you stand on a back-to-work order?
Pardon?
Where do you stand on a back-to-work order on the West Kootenay school strike?
I'm against.
You're against it. That's 58 to 50. And where are you speaking from?
Chase, British Columbia.
Do you have a yes or no for me?
I'm a yes for you.
59 to 50. Down the line. For or against?
Against.
59, 51. For or against?
Against it.
59, 52. For or against? For or against?
For.
59, that's 60, 52. I'm wondering about the timing now. No, I may have to go out. I think I'll go out now so that we're ready to pick up the conference anytime it starts. I'm going to take a chance on it. The score at the moment is 64, 52 against. We'll go to a break and we should be in time to pick up the start of the press conference or continue the phone calls. Take a break, please, Henry. Thank you.
Okay. Sure.
Some of you may not have heard this. They're setting up the press conference room in Victoria right now. And I saw John Arnett over fixing the table around. And they're just waiting for the Premier to arrive. Presumably he's finishing his conference with, there's John Arnett there, with Labour Minister Allan Williams. But while we're there, some of you may have missed this incredible bulletin which came on the wire this morning. Guess who the new Governor-General of Canada is? Guess. You couldn't guess. You couldn't guess. London, Reuters. Queen Elizabeth has approved the appointment of Edward Richard Schreier, 43, a former Premier of Manitoba, as the next Governor-General of Canada. Buckingham Palace announced today. I throw that in just to let you know. I was doing my poll, and my poll shows, this is a very quick poll, on whether callers are in favour or against of a back-to-work order, of which we are absolutely certain. And 60 people said yes, they are in favour of a back-to-work order, and 52 said no. And the one thing that tells you is that there is considerable feeling and that on a quick snap poll of willing participants who lifted the phone and dialed, comes out pretty close to even Stevens. I would have thought it might have come out much more in favour of a back-to-work order. But as you know, what Jim Kinnaird says about the wrath of the labour movement and the intervention of the free collective bargaining process. We're just about ready now, but in the meantime, until the Premier comes in, I don't want to show you a dull shot of some cameramen messing around. Let's carry on with the poll. Are you for or against it? Where are you?
Vancouver.
Are you for or against it? Can't hear you.
Against it.
Thank you, ma'am. 53. How about you?
I'm for it.
61. How about you?
Against.
54. How about you?
Against it.
55. How about you?
For it.
62. How about you?
Against it.
56. How about you?
Against.
57. How about you?
For.
63. Where are you speaking from? Hello? Where are you calling from? That's Trail, but they can't hear me.
For.
4. Thank you. 64. Where are you speaking from?
Rossland.
How do you stand on it?
Against.
That's 64 to 58. Down the line again. How do you stand on it?
I'm against it.
64 to 59. And you, sir, or ma'am?
For it.
65. And you? Hello. How do you stand on my back-to-work poll?
Got me.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Hello.
Yes.
Don't use so very much paper. What's the matter with you, you old goat?
I'll put him down as doubtful about Webster. Where do you stand on the back-to-work order?
For it.
66 to 59. And you?
I'm for it.
67. And you?
For.
68. And you?
For it.
69. And you?
For it.
70. The protagonists get in, you know. And you?
For it.
71. And you?
Order them back to work straight away.
72. And you?
For it.
73.
You.
Where are you speaking from? Hello there. I'll put them back on hold. How about you?
For it.
74. And you?
I'm with it.
75. And you?
I'm for it.
76. And you?
Against.
60. And you?
I'm for it.
77. And you?
Against.
61. And you?
Against it.
62. And you?
Against it.
63. Where are you speaking from? Hello there. Where are you calling from?
Victoria.
How do you stand on this?
For it.
78. And you?
Against.
64. And you? And you?
Against.
65. Despite the old fellow who regards me as a wasteful goat. 78 to 65. And you?
For it.
79. And you?
Against.
Oh, 66. And you? Where are you? You're against. 67. And you?
For it.
80. And you?
For it.
81. And you? Come on, give me an answer.
Against.
Against it.
There.
81 to 68. I'm going to stop it at the next even number. Are you?
Against.
Against. Oh, stop it there because there's really not an awful big percentage in it. 81 for it, 69 against it. Number of people polled, 150. 150. What percentage is that? Well, it's close to 40, 60% for and 40 against. It looks like there's some action. I think what we'll do is we'll get a commercial break out of the way so we can come back live. Take it away, Henry. Do you two know each other? The Premier is still in the Cabinet meeting, which Labour Minister Williams is there, of course, too, and as I understand it, it may well be a pretty full Cabinet meeting, because they'll all have been called back to Victoria ahead of time. And this matter is expected in the room at any particular time, and we're just waiting for the statement. But this thing is of such moment, it's almost momentous throughout British Columbia, for non-teaching strikers in school boards to be about to be ordered back to work. And I think John Gibbs is coming up the camera now. John, can you hear me? Can't hear me yet. Okay, John Gibbs will give us a report of the physical situation on the ground in the media conference room in Victoria. John?
Jack, I'm in the press theatre here in the Legislature buildings at the moment, and we're just waiting for the Premier. He was not in his office this morning at 8 o'clock when the deadline passed. His press secretary said that he would have an announcement at 8:45. That was delayed because apparently he wanted to discuss it with his cabinet. Cabinet went in at 9 o'clock, and he's up there now. We don't know what they're talking about. Presumably they're talking about the form of the legislation or the plans for calling the House back tomorrow. I spoke to both sides in the dispute this morning, and there were no negotiations overnight. So the 8 o'clock deadline passed. No one was talking. There can't really be any doubt that he's going to call the legislature back and back to work order. But at the moment, we're still waiting for the Premier down here in the press theatre. We're told he'll be down any moment, but no one's allowed to go into cabinet to pull him out at this point.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much. John Gibbs will stand by for us in Victoria, and we'll pick up the press conferences as soon as it starts. I can already see rumblings of political confrontation in it, as everybody can. But one of the points that John Gibbs made right now was that there was no negotiations between the parties overnight. And that means that Premier Bennett will be accused of a tactical error. In other words, if you're going to make a preemptive strike against the enemy, wrong word, take preemptive action against the enemy, perhaps you shouldn't put them under the gun of an ultimatum for negotiations, because that means generally that only one side is prepared to negotiate, and the other side, who are going to come under the hammer anyway, saying we're not going to negotiate from the point of view of hammer tactics, we'll sit back and see what he does. Because Kootenay has been very forthright in its opposition. I think I can remember Fred Pike coming on that line quite strongly when Brian and I were covering it live from the Kootenays. So the tactical error of which Bennett will be accused is that he shouldn't have made it given any ultimatum deadlines. He should just have moved softly with the big stick, whammo, back to work. The big problem will be, what will be the conditions of back to work? Will they be ordered back to work on the present wage scales? Or will there be any little enticement? Or will it be, I think as I mentioned earlier, the inquiry commissioner appointed on a binding arbitration basis? That might make the union a little less unhappy, because binding arbitration always means that the wages go up some. Behind it all, of course, is the basic concern of CUPE that they don't like this business of not being able to tackle school boards one at a time. In the West Kootenays, as you know, CUPE struck one school board, and then the certified bargaining agent for the 5 units locked, 4 or 5, I always forget which, locked out the others. And Fred Pike made it perfectly clear the other day that what he wants to do is to negotiate with them one at a time, and that gives you the pecking order battle. You get something from one school board, and then you can go and say, we got it from them, you better give us the same thing. But the general trend in British Columbia in the construction industry, in all the big industries, has been, and in municipal bargaining in many ways, although Vancouver recently rejected it, has been a united front so that the unions can't pick off municipalities or school boards, as the case may be, one at a time. See a little bit of action in the room at Victoria, but mostly television cameramen and reporters. But as I say, we're going to hang tough, and I'm going to take your telephone calls. I'm not going to do any more polls just now, because I have found, I'll tell you a little secret about telephone polls. I learned over many years of experience in radio, that you get an emotional response generally to begin with, and then if you run the poll long enough, it always comes out 50-50. It's the funniest thing. You can do a political poll in a campaign, you can, not without even trying, you can always bring it up, because the protagonists on the other side say, hey, the enemy are ahead, quick, get through on the phone. And it comes out 50-50. But there is a fairly strong tide both ways in this province on back to work. So I'm going to take some phone calls. What have we got in the way of long distance, Linda? Bottom? Some salmon arm, ma'am. What do you think of the situation?
Well, I don't think any public employee should be put in a position where they have to call a strike or a walkout. When everybody else gets a raise, they should automatically get one. And secondly, I'd like to know why the Parliament goes ahead and changes things without a real public poll.
You elect the legislature, you elect the parliament, you give them power to act. If you don't like what they do, the only thing you can do is throw the rascals out next time round.
No,
if you start to run a government by plebiscite, gosh, you'd never get anything done.
Well, things like changing the flag and the criminal code and that. They said a public poll was taken on it. I never saw anybody from...
We're not talking about either the flag or nor the criminal code. We're talking about housekeeping in British Columbia. Can the non-teaching employees of a school board wreck a year's education for the students? We have binding arbitration for teachers, and they do very well on it. Thank you very much. Why see many people, if it works for the teachers, can't it work for other people? The point being, of course, that the teachers have done very well on binding arbitration. They do object to province-wide bargaining, but there's not that many complaints from teachers. But should there be binding arbitration when we suddenly discover that one small group of 250 non-teaching employees can shut out 14,000 pupils and a couple of thousand teachers? Doesn't seem...
No, it's not right.
But it's nothing for a plebiscite. Where are you speaking from?
I'm speaking for Port Alberni, and I'm in favor of the back-to-work legislation, and particularly in cases where public safety and public order and all
well,
the
this does not cover public safety, and it doesn't really cover public order.
It's not really, but anyway, I think in this case, and with all the children and everything concerned, that I'm in favor of the back-to-work.
Oh, I'll give you my opinion. I'm in favor of a back-to-work order as long as it's a reasonably fair back-to-work order and puts some kind of opportunity for the matter to be hammered out without any more messing around. It's the messing around that's so annoying to the parents and the children. Go ahead, please.
Well, Merry Christmas, you all.
Oh, no insults. No Merry Christmas, please.
Did Don Scott get a job yet?
Hey, Linda, I'll talk to you off the air. We got a number of calls yesterday. Linda, will you take one off the air about Don Scott? Thanks for calling. Merry Christmas, whoever you are. Oh, I see John coming up. Has John got something to report to us? Soon, eh? Go ahead, please. Can't hear you, Linda. Are you there? Yes, go ahead, please.
You bald-headed bastard.
Okay. I understand we're going pretty live to Victoria now. I see John Gibbs, our Victoria man, our man in Victoria. And we're just waiting for timing. John will update. Williams just went out. Okay, John, take it away.
Jack, I'd like to tell you that the Premier will be here in 30 seconds, but I can't. He's still in the Cabinet room, and we just learned a few minutes ago that the Labour Minister has just gone into the Cabinet. That could delay it a little bit more. If there's anyone he has to talk to about this, it certainly is the Labour Minister. And so we're told pretty soon, but we're still waiting. And presumably they're discussing something of substance up there, and hopefully he'll have some details for us when he does come out.
John, we've gone this far. We've got the microwave link open. I think we will keep the microwave link open until we get this announcement. If we've got to back and fill and sweat and toil between now and the 12 o'clock news. So if you'll stand by, we'll stand by. How do I stand and break somebody? Is it time for a break or not? I'd sure like to get a quiet puff of a cigarette off the air. John, we'll be standing by.
I can't hear you on the phone.
Don't go away, hold on. My mother told me that when I went into television there'd be moments like this. And the moment is, of course, that Allan Williams has apparently, I think John said, just recently gone in. Have you got Scott? Has just recently gone into the Cabinet. So maybe he's carrying in the proposed drafted legislation. But we're going to hang tough. I'm telling you, we're going to give you this as soon as it breaks so that the people in the West Kootenays and the Labour movement and the interested people throughout British Columbia can know precisely what happens when it happens. Now, in the meantime, so I can have a quiet cup of coffee and fix... It's not cured yet. So that I can have a quiet cup of coffee. Is it cured now? Is it cured now? Don't roll it yet. No. We're going to use an interview of a friend of mine, good friend. He won't mind if we only get part way through it. We'll chop it off and kill it. This is to keep you at the television set until Premier Bennett comes in as a substitute. Meet George Bain of the Toronto Star. I cannot offhand remember the name of the political sage who delivered himself of the following advice. But it is the most practical advice that any aspiring or interested young or older Canadian might have when he chooses to run for a political party. And that advice simply is, it matters not that you won or lost, but for whom you played the game. And if you've picked the party for whom you played the game, win or lose, you are the victor. And the person who passed that advice on to Canadians at large is a very distinguished, well, he doesn't seem it when you see him, but he's a kind of distinguished Canadian journalist, George Bain, associate editor of the Toronto Star, based, I do believe, in the nation's capital.
Absolutely, and half thanks for the introduction.
And George, of course, only comes to the West Coast, like the other people who visit us occasionally, when he wants something from us. And George this time wants to sell another book. Right, George?
Right in part. Right in the part that I want to sell another book, but not right in the part that I only come here for when I want something from it.
Oh.
Apart from the pleasure of your company and the company of various others and the salubrious climate and the wisdom and the...
How do I hold... I haven't yet learned how to hold books at the right angle. George is selling a book called Letters from Lilac. And any long-time readers of George, whether it was on the old Toad and Flail, what were the other names for it? Snowed...
Gloat and Whale.
Gloat and Whale, Toad and Flail.
I can't remember the others. There are others.
There are others. And I want you to give me the origin.
Mop and Pail.
Mop and Pail. Give me the origin of that magnificent quote I remember. It matters not that you won or lost, but for whom you played the game.
It's a little embarrassing, but I'm not sure I can remember the origin. But I think it was related to Harry Melfort's efforts to win the prime ministership against Pierre Trudeau in 1968, and he didn't make it. Whether he should have made it or not is a question on which some people would have doubts nowadays.
Harry Melfort, of course, is one of your intimate friends from Lilac, Saskatchewan.
Oh, yeah. He's our perennial MP.
When did you first meet Harry Melfort, MP, from Lilac, Saskatchewan?
When I first needed him, as a matter of fact. This whole thing got started when I wanted to renew a column, which I'd been doing a number of years before and needed to get started, and I started out by doing a letter telling how I found things in Ottawa, having returned, and I got back a letter, and the correspondence has gone on ever since.
Well, of course, Harry Melfort is not the primogenitor of the correspondence. Who is the primogenitor?
Clem Watkins Jr. is my correspondent there, and it is through him that I have met all of these other people.
Clem Watkins Jr. comes from Lilac, Saskatchewan, which you describe as?
He belongs to the Lilac Advance, which is the paper there, which is of which the slogan is "Covers the prairie like a mitten."
It's the jewel of the wheat belt.
The jewel of the wheat belt.
It's the most important small town in Canada. And you've been writing these tongue-in-cheek columns now for how long?
Oh, forever. Yeah, since 1964.
What would Clem Watkins or Harry Melfort MP think of the state of the nation today, particularly when I see that Pierre Trudeau, our esteemed leader, was quoted in Ontario the other day as saying that they've got to watch out because there's a conspiracy by the media which is threatening society.
Yeah, threatening society.
Isn't that what Pierre said?
Yeah. The media and the opposition are in some way, I wasn't entirely clear in what way, but they are potentially a threat to society. Well, I'm quite sure that the Lilac Current Affairs and Historical Society, looking at this, would necessarily reflect on the phenomenon that leaders tend to see media conspiracies at the time when their fortunes are down. And there are lots of examples of this. Take, for instance, here, John Diefenbaker. Remember John Diefenbaker and them? Mm-hmm. They were, the Eastern media establishment was going to do him down. Nothing wrong with his administration at the time. And you've got the Johnson administration in the U.S., Nixon, Harold Wilson in Britain. It is a curious phenomenon
At the moment they're on the way down.
That leaders discover media conspiracies, as if the media was a monolith at the moment when they are down in their fortunes.
But is it not a fact that the media in this country is a little bit of a monolith, and that it tends to parrot the implications of the Line story in the Globe and Mail, if not in the Toronto Star? That we don't really have an independent, provocative press which fights governments the way they should?
There does tend to be a certain herd instinct. I wouldn't argue against that. People do look at what their peers have written, and they may be impressed with that. But it is absolutely impossible, and it's absurd to suggest that any such thing as a media conspiracy can exist against any politician. I don't believe that the media has ever defeated a good government or elected a bad one, because the media, in general...
Let me think about that for a minute. You don't believe that the media has ever elected a good government?
Has never elected a bad government nor defeated a good one. In other words, governments are elected by their own efforts, and they are defeated by their own efforts. And I don't believe that the media, because it is terribly diverse, despite this small element of herd instinct that exists.
Well, now, of course, you're looking at the view from central Canada. We look at the view from the West Coast. And we know that news comes from there to here, but seldom goes from here to there. I mean, we do resent, some of us, forgive the expression, because I ain't no Trudeau fan at the moment, an Eastern media mafia. We do resent the Eastern media mafia.
But you're just, in what you've said, reflecting exactly the same thing that I have said, that you are not a Trudeau enthusiast. And yet you differentiate yourself from the Eastern media. You have come to a conclusion that is the same as mine, although we've seen each other, what, once, twice in the last year. Is this a conspiracy between us that we have come to this conclusion together? This is why I say that any sort of media conspiracy is a load of
garbage.
Garbage. Yeah, that was the word I was using.
I've got to keep you uninhibited newspaper men on the right, proper family tone for morning television, such as mine own.
Yes.
Mine own. Now, just made a snag has developed. Maybe not a snag. Discussion in the cabinet about the particular form of back-to-work legislation involving the 14,000 school children in the West Kootenay strike. Now, we don't know what the snag is. John told us the last time he was on that Williams had just gone into the cabinet meeting. Presumably, Williams took with him the draft of the legislation, because you can't order them back to work without legislation. But as I said, I don't want to go back to that George Bain interview. It's totally out of sync. So what we're going to do is we're going to stand by here at least until the Premier appears. That's what we're going to do. We may have to change it at 10:30 and perhaps break into a program later. We'll decide that later on. But I want the people in the West Kootenay to know, and throughout the rest of the province, that we're going to continue this total coverage because it's essential. Here we all of a sudden, after no second session in 90... Here comes the Premier now. My instincts were right. I presume that the Premier, when he comes up to the microphone, you'll just open the feed and let him talk then and there. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
What I'm going to do, just before we get into it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an announcement, and then questions dealing with the dispute, I'm going to leave for the Minister of Labor to deal with any questions you have on the history or the mechanics of what's taken place, because his office and his ministry have been directly involved. Yesterday I announced that if resolution could not be accomplished by 8 this morning, that I would advise the Speaker to call the Legislature to deal with legislation that would resolve the dispute between the Accredited Employers Group in the Kootenay region, the school districts, and with CUPE, which have played a hardship on the students in that area. Our action is to bring resolution to protect the opportunities for the students of that area to get an education. And I must say those students there are important to the government of British Columbia. I was distressed to hear some suggestion that it was only a dispute way over in the Kootenays involving students there. I want to make it clear they are as important to this government as are the students in Victoria, the students in Vancouver, the students in the Okanagan, or the students in the central and northern part of British Columbia. Our concern is for all of their futures. All are equal and all are important. It's their interest we have in mind, and as such, the legislature, representing British Columbians, will be called upon to deal with their interest, protect their interest, because they are the unwilling victims in this dispute. As such, I've already advised the Speaker this morning to call the legislative members for 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
How long do you expect that sitting to last, sir?
Well, I would consider that all of the members of the legislature concerned for those students would dispatch it quickly. Other times when we've had legislation of this nature, which is important to a large group of our British Columbians, the legislature has cooperated in dealing with it with dispatch. And I would hope that they would proceed in what has been traditional, deal with dispatch. I would hope that the facilities then would be open on Monday, and the students would have a normal opportunity to receive their education. I certainly expect that. I would hope that would happen, and that is a responsibility that lies with the legislature as a whole. And in no way am I meaning to direct the legislature, because every member has their usual opportunity, but I would say if I had a preference, that's what I would prefer, because the reason we're coming back is to provide an educational opportunity for those students.
Mr. Premier, they will only have 1 week of school left before the holidays, and then they'll be coming back on January the 2nd or thereabouts. Could not the extra week or that period of time be used to attempt to solve a problem and then bring the legislature in on the 2nd of January?
Well, Mr. LaVirtue, I'm a father of 4 sons, and every day is important in their education, and to summarily dismiss a week, which will be very important to students who are already falling behind because of the conditions that have existed, would be wrong. Every day is important, every week's important, and is...
41 days, Mr. Premier.
Well, the government has only... the government, first of all, is not a government that is prepared to move against groups, that is, against the union or management in a dispute, but we're moving for the students and for the parents and the people of the Kootenay region. We've allowed a full opportunity for the collective bargaining to take place. And let me say this, I hope the parties stay together. I would hope that perhaps even before the legislature meets, this doesn't preclude that they could get together and resolve this, as I hope they would before we meet at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. They still have that opportunity.
Was there any?
They have that responsibility.
Was there any attempt by the government overnight to get them together?
These are the questions I wish you'd address now to the Minister of Labour.
Mr. Premier, before you go, can you give us a comment about Ed Schreier being appointed the Governor General of Canada?
Well, I've known Mr. Schreier when he was the Premier of Manitoba from contact at First Ministers meetings, Western Premiers, Canadian First Ministers meetings, and Premiers conferences. He has a history of legislative experience both in the Parliament of Canada and in the legislature in Manitoba. He is, in my view, is sensitive to the responsibilities of government, and he is above all a strong Canadian, and I believe that he can do an outstanding job as in this important role.
Are you surprised? Why? Oh. Well.
John? Here comes Allan Williams now. He's going to give us the details, presumably, of the back-to-work legislation. Labour Minister Williams.
Matters which I haven't dealt with in earlier statements. I'd be happy to respond to your questions. Let me say at the outset, however, that As you are all aware, I can't talk about the details of legislation which is being prepared and which will be presented to the House tomorrow morning.
You can't tell us whether or not we're going to have binding arbitration will be the tool to be used to finalize the settlement?
No, as you are aware, legislation will not be discussed until it is being introduced on the floor of the House.
Exactly what happened in terms of efforts to settle the dispute from 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon when the Premier made his announcement until 8 o'clock this morning?
Sure.
Following my meetings over Monday and Tuesday with the parties, and when they rejected the proposal I made to them for resolution of this problem, I found that the parties remain in Victoria, and officials of the ministry were in touch with both parties throughout yesterday and last evening, and there were meetings underway, I'm advised, and are still underway, which could produce a resolution of this work stoppage. Whether it will produce a new contract or a mechanism for renewing the agreements which expired on the 30th of June or not, I can't tell until those discussions are complete.
Mr. Williams, I spoke to both parties this morning, just sort of before 8 o'clock, and they told me that that there had apparently been some contact with someone in your department, but they hadn't been talking to each other at all. And in fact, the school trustee said he sat up all night waiting for a call back and didn't get one. Are you saying that there were negotiations overnight, or there are negotiations
I said
now?
that the parties were discussing amongst themselves within their own groups this problem, and the communication was taking place through officials of the ministry in precisely the same way that all of the discussions have been taking place over the last number of weeks. The parties have not met face to face, and any communication there has been between them has been through the mediation officer. This is one of the difficulties, is that the parties have got themselves into positions which I identify as being rigid and inflexible to such an extent that they can't meet together. And hence, the resolution is made more difficult.
Does this point out a need for bringing education under the Essential Services Act? Or anything relating to education?
I don't believe that this one particular dispute is sufficient to indicate this as being the course of action which should follow, and but we will be examining the impact of this and other disputes that there have been in the various school districts throughout the province to determine whether a pattern of practice is emerging on the part of accredited employers and the unions with whom they must deal. If that indicates some need for permanent legislative assistance, then we'll consider it at that time.
So at this point, your officials are involved, the parties are talking to each other through them towards negotiation, is that?
We're waiting for the parties, first of all, to resolve the matter of the work stoppage. And that being resolved, I would hope that the parties can also find a means by which they can get back to the business of settling the issues which are necessary for the conclusion of new collective agreements.
We'll leave Allan Williams there. We hope to have a few words with Mr. Bennett. First, we'll take a quick break, then I'll recap and talk to Mr. Bennett.
About the Premier about the 1 week of school left. There is schools in the West Kootenays. Students are on a semester system. One group of students who will be writing or hoping to write scholarship exams in mid-January.
Yeah, we'll do it. Pros wear dark shirts so the mics don't show.
Testing, testing, testing.
In just a moment, we're going to talk directly to Premier Bennett in the studio in Victoria. Mr. Bennett, can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you, Jack.
Good morning, sir, and thank you for coming over.
Thank you.
Was it a difficult decision to convince yourself and your cabinet to bring the legislature back to work for the back-to-work legislation?
Jack, it isn't a difficult decision when a dispute that affects these large number of children and families in the Kootenays reaches this stage. It's a decision that no government wants to make. We all hope that these disputes can be resolved with the free collective bargaining process, and that indeed that we would not have disruptions of this nature. But once they're there, once it seems after all of the efforts of the Ministry of Labour that the sides cannot get together, the government has a responsibility to the community at large, and that is to the people of the Kootenay region, and particularly the students, but their families as well.
Sir, did I understand you to say that you still kind of hope, a vain hope perhaps, that the parties might settle by the time the legislature meets tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock?
I say they still have that opportunity. Because we have called the legislature, because they haven't resolved it as yet, does not take away from them either the opportunity or the responsibility to get together and resolve this dispute in a responsible way, and they still have that opportunity right up until we meet. However, we've called the legislature. This government is prepared to deal with it, and will be presenting legislation to the members.
Perhaps a little piece of history. I know you haven't got that much time. When Dave Barrett had his famous back-to-work order for the pulp and the IWA situation, was the legislature then in session, or was it called back?
If my memory serves me correctly, and I was there, we were called back.
Called back. And did you support that legislation wholeheartedly?
We supported the legislation.
Do you expect Mr. Barrett to support your legislation?
I would expect that beyond the politics, the political politics of this, that each member of the legislature has a conscience and a responsibility beyond their political party pressures to rise above that and represent the community interest and the interests of these people. And while parties may take a stand tomorrow, it will be an opportunity for members of the legislature to take an individual stand for the people.
How long would you like to see the session last, sir? 1 day?
Well, I would hope that recognizing we have an opportunity to get the schools open on Monday, that we could deal with it with dispatch. I've been back on 2 emergency sessions when I was opposition leader, and the NDP called emergency sessions, one to do with the firefighters and the other to do with the back to work on the forest industry. In both cases, we weren't limited in our opportunity to speak, but we chose not to delay the proceedings so that they could be dealt with with dispatch. And I believe both of those, the firefighters particularly, I believe went 1 day, and I believe the others was disposed of in a similar time frame.
Sir, it was on this program that Mr. McGee made his famous remark under questioning about essential services, and where the opinions were expressed from up there as well as down here, that perhaps this strike had dragged on a long while because the West Kootenays was far away. I think you answered that partly this morning. Do you feel strongly about those opinions?
I was distressed to hear some suggestion of opinion that the government shouldn't act because in reality it was only a labor dispute off in one corner of the province in the Kootenays, and I feel very strongly that people should be made aware that I personally and this government consider the students and the people of every part of this province equal, and we will deal on their behalf equally. And they're as important to me as the students or parents in Victoria or Vancouver or Kelowna or what have you, and I reject that just because it's in the Kootenays, there's no reason for the government to step in and act. They are British Columbians. They deserve an educational opportunity.
One final question. Jim Kinnaird of the BC Fed said very bluntly on NewsHour last night, Mr. Bennett, that any interference with the free collective bargaining, such as you obviously plan in the legislation, would bring down the wrath of organised labour. Would you care to respond to that remark by Jim Kinnaird?
Well, I made a speech last night in which I was talking to a group in Victoria in which I said this government would be prepared to act on behalf of the people when their rights and their opportunities were threatened by large pressure groups or pressure groups in our society in British Columbia. I mentioned the fight we took against the CPR on the ENN Railway, and we'll fight them, and we'll fight any groups that on the public's behalf. I do not look for confrontation. It's not good, but I'm not afraid as a government or as a premier to fight on behalf and protect the people's rights through the legislative system. That's what a legislature is there for. That's what governments are elected to do, and that's what we will do as long as we're government.
One very final question, Mr. Bennett, just a technical one. I gather, therefore, that nobody will know, none of the public will know, even the opposition will know, the details of the precise legislation until it's presented as a bill in the House tomorrow.
That has been the usual procedure in the past when we were called in as members and as an opposition to the legislature, and it'll be the same this time as well.
Thank you, Premier Bennett of British Columbia. Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Jack.
We'll go to break. He's not there yet.
This one here?
Yes, we won't know it till it's in the House tomorrow. Can John hear me now?
Yes, I can hear him.
Hello, John. How are you?
Yep.
That worked out we're not on the air yet, John. That worked out very well for us this morning.
Okay. Do you still want to do something now?
Yeah, I need to fill for 2-3 minutes.
Okay. I don't have much to say. I was trying to keep a half ear on what he and Williams were saying out there, but...
No.
Yeah, okay.
Williams said virtually nothing.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, he wasn't needed at all, except, what did he say?
We carried that, did we?
Yeah, we carried Williams.
Yeah.
We cut out, when it became obvious Williams was saying nothing else of any consequence, we shuffled into you. It went just like gangbusters, John.
Okay.
I'll say a couple of things which you can hear, and then you can... Oh, we can talk back and forward.
Sure.
I'll be giving you a 6-minute count, and that'll be to the end of...
Well, John, apart from the fact that the legislature is meeting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and apart from the fact that the details of the bill, whether it's going to be legislated back to work just as that, or legislated back to work with an inquiry commissioner with binding arbitration, and apart from the fact that nobody seems to be talking to anybody on the other side, we didn't learn an awful lot, did we?
Not too much, no. I was interested to hear the Labour Minister, Allan Williams, say that there were efforts, gather underway to get the parties back together, or there's some talking going on, because people I spoke to in both camps this morning before 8 o'clock simply said they hadn't had any negotiation at all. In fact, the CUPE people came down here, said they weren't really prepared for negotiations. You know, they responded to a telegram from the Labour Minister saying, come down and have a meeting. They say they didn't bring their files with them and so forth.
I don't even know if the CUPE are still in Victoria. Can you tell me that?
Yes, they are still in Victoria. They were to have a meeting this morning in one of the hotels among themselves, and the same with the school district representatives. Now, Mr. Williams is telling us that his department is in contact with both groups towards getting them together. But it's they've really given them an impossible task, certainly that 8 o'clock deadline this morning. I mean, in some ways it was ridiculous to expect them to settle.
I think you're dead on there. And not only ridiculous, but some people will say that it was a tactical error because once you put them under a hammer of an ultimatum, the union is obviously going to sit back and say, look, you're going to give us the hammer, give us the hammer, and then we'll see what we're going to do. But Williams was also quite interesting when he said this morning, and we carried this, that he made it quite clear and implied that one of the reasons for the legislation is that the two sides have got themselves into such inflexible positions they can't even meet in the same room and talk to each other.
That's right. The other day, he made it quite clear that that in his view, both sides were to blame. There are all kinds of complicated issues involved, but it's quite clear from his attitude and people in his office around here that they're simply not pleased. They're upset with both sides.
Actually, it gives the government a little bit of a good excuse by saying, look, if they're not talking and can't even meet in the same room, and we're getting hammered by 14,000 parents, what else can we do?
Yeah, I think the question quite rightly raised, and certainly one that they're going to get tomorrow in the legislature, I think, is why did you wait so long? Why did they let it go this far? I was thinking last night, it occurs to me that Premier Bennett was saying yesterday that we were asked about when we're going to get the regular session. He said he wants his new ministers, after that shuffle, to get comfortable in their portfolios. And while they talk about everyday accounting before Christmas, I think what they really want is to make sure those schools are back in operation after Christmas on Monday or in the new year, without having to call the legislature back then, because if they called them back in January, the pressure from the opposition would be on to keep them here and have a full session. This way they can, I think, deal with it, and then the heat is off for January, so they can delay the session longer if they want.
Yeah, it was a bit specious, I think, when Allan Williams said that they still have a full opportunity for collective bargaining between 10:30 this morning and 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. There'll be no bargaining at all, I'll bet you, of any consequence.
Well, as I said, I spoke to one of the school trustees. He had literally sat up all night in his clothes, he said, waiting for a call from the Labor Department to tell him he could have someone to talk to, and there wasn't anyone.
I tried to give Premier Bennett a little shot on the wrath of Jim Kinnaird, but he handled that very smoothly. Oh, we are against all big pressure groups, all big lobbies, all big this and that. I don't know. One of the fascinating things as an observer is what will the BC Fed say or do? Because the NDP can really hardly vote against in any, tough way back to work involving 14,000 school kids.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're going to, Mr. Bennett, of course, called it politicking. They'll certainly have some objections, but in the end, it's going to be pretty difficult for them to even stall it, let alone vote against it.
If Williams or anybody has dropped a copy of the draft legislation in the corridor, make sure you pick it up, will you? Because otherwise, we won't know till tomorrow morning at 10-something, 10:30, what the precise legislation is going to be.
Yeah, of course, I should have pointed out before, that is normal legislative procedure. There's nothing special about that.
Well, if you get your hands on one, don't hesitate.
I'll send it right over.
Thank you very much, John Gibbs, BCTV's man in Victoria. Thanks, John.
Okay.
Excellent coverage this morning, even though we had to sweat and wait for it some time. Can I have a word with Linda? Linda?
Yes.
Tomorrow?
Well, Brian's on his way up to the Kootenays, so hopefully we'll have a report from him.
Brian's back up in Castlegar? As if I didn't know.
Yeah.
He's going to do the BCTV West Kootenay school strike sweep once more. In fact,
That's right.
some smart aleck phoned up this morning and said, you and the news hour, this is a BC television legislative session, but at least you got some action on the school strike. What else apart from that?
John Fraser, the Conservative MP for Vancouver South, is
A Conservative MP?
Yes.
Coming in to see me? A lawyer at that? Tomorrow morning. What else? Letters.
Hopefully we'll get to the letters tomorrow, yes.
It's been a good week. I like these breaking stories, folks. How much time have I got to go? Premier Bennett has not outlined, but he and Williams, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, the session meets to deal with dispatch, perhaps even in one day if the NDP cooperates, the end of the West Kootenay CUPE School Board strike and lockout. Tomorrow, Webster, 9 a.m. precisely.